have this floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Before I reply to all the remarks that have been made, I would like to make one thing very clear to people who are following this debate. If we vote against this agreement, if we withhold our consent, it doesn't mean that people will be blown up in airplanes. This Parliament has stated very clearly in the 2010 resolutions that we consider that the data can and should be used for the fight against terrorism and serious transnational crime. That has been endorsed by everybody in this House. This House has never categorically rejected the use of personal data for security purposes. So I think that kind of scare stories have no place in a serious and rational and factual debate as we are having here today. Secondly, colleagues, the devil is always in the detail. If you listen to general statements about the agreement contains good clauses on data protection and legal safeguards, that sounds very nice. But I recommend everyone here to actually read the text. Read the text. The devil is in the detail because, frankly, hardly any of the objections and hesitations that I put in my introduction have been answered by the Commission. To start with the purpose limitation, I repeat, we all agree in this room that data can and should be used for counterterrorism and the fight against serious and transnational crime. However, we excluded specifically other purposes, such as customs, immigration controls and public health. That has nothing to do with blowing up airplanes, frankly. And colleagues, do consider that if you, for the last 10 years or so, there has been massive collection of personal data, massive collection, and that never prevented terrorists from carrying out attacks, even if we had all the data, even 9/11. The secret services had the terrorists on their radar screen. So let's not pretend that the massive collection of these data will prevent terrorist attacks. We have allowed the use of this data, but not for customs, not for immigration controls, and not for public health. And frankly, Commissioner, this is exactly what, in my view, the current agreement allows. And if you read the assessment of the European Data Protection Supervisor, as well as the Article 29 Working Group, this is exactly what they too read into the agreement. And I think as long as there is ambiguity about this, we cannot vote for it. Because this is the third point I want to make. We are not asked to come up with solutions here. We are asked to endorse a compromise, because we all live in the real world. There's always political compromise, but it has to be compatible with EU law. And this is not remotely compatible with EU law. That is a problem. I cannot reconcile it with my conscience and with my brain, indeed, with my intelligence, to endorse an agreement that is so blatantly violating EU law. Come on. Now, as to I'll reply only to some of the remarks that have been made, because otherwise, we'll still be here at 7. About the 2004 agreement, that we cannot disregard the 2004 agreement. I'm sorry. And it wasn't a temporary agreement. It was a very permanent agreement. It was only temporary because it was chucked out by the court. Indeed, on procedural grounds, because the court did not dare to touch the substance. But this House did challenge the agreement on substantial grounds as well, not only procedural grounds. So we cannot pretend that we had an opinion back in 2004. Now, the Commissioner has said again, I come back to the purpose limitation, that this agreement clarifies and narrows the purpose. Well, I don't want it to clarify the purpose. I want it indeed to narrow the purpose. The problem is, exactly as has been said by colleague Tavares here, it narrows the purpose in Article 4.1, and then it widens the purpose in Articles 4.2, 4.3 and 4.4. Then you say the purpose is law enforcement needs relating to threats facing the US. Well, I very much hope that if we are asked to sign up to international agreements, that it's actually mainly the interest of our citizens we keep in mind. I have said what I've had to say about push-pull. You may say it is compulsory for the carriers to shift to push within 2 years. Well, you know, that has been the objective since 2004. We know that this obligation cannot be enforced. You have said so in writing. It cannot be enforced. Yes, it can be enforced by the national data protection authorities, who can impose fines of maybe a few thousand euros. Well, you know, compared to the millions that have to be invested by the carriers in order to switch to push. And that still does not explain to us why we should give pull to the Americans. Because again, colleagues, this sets a precedent. What if, let's say, the next countries knocking on our door are China and Russia? What are we going to say? They want the data under the same conditions. They're not interested in the standards set by the Australia Agreement. They will say, we want the data on the same conditions. Say China wants it. And you may say, well, we're not willing to give it to you. And they're going to remind us that only recently the European Union has asked China to bail us out of the economic crisis. So I don't think that we will be in a stronger position when we are negotiating with other countries. We have to get it right now and not in the future with other countries. As to the alternatives and whether having this agreement is better than no agreement, frankly, colleagues, no. This agreement for our citizens is not better than having no agreement, because we have asked repeatedly all the legal experts and the Commission to point out to us what legal safeguards this agreement provides to our citizens that they do not have when there is no agreement or when there are bilateral agreements. There are none. Actually, the agreement says in so many words that no rights can be derived from this agreement by natural or legal persons. No rights can be derived. Never mind the legal status of an executive, what's it called, an executive agreement. It's not an international agreement. The only added value of this agreement is that it provides legal certainty to carriers. That is a very valid point, and one that I endorse. The problem is that is the only added value of this agreement. Is that enough reason to then endorse an agreement that is not compatible with EU law and that leaves the citizens without any protection? No, it is not. Because what we are asked to do here is not vote on an agreement that gives legal protection to our citizens. We are asked here to legalize something that is illegal. Yes, I'll come to a conclusion, Chair. But I do think, again, this is an important subject which is underlined by the presence of the Commission and the Council here. One final point on reviews. You know, having the possibility of a review, you can review a bad agreement, but then it's still a bad agreement. Secondly, like Renate Weber, you know, looking at the experience we had with SWIFT, I have very little confidence in the possibilities of a joint review. Besides, people carrying out the joint review are bound to secrecy. That is the condition under which they will get access to the data. Third, if you look at the joint reviews of past PNR agreements, they actually conclude Chairman, please bear with me for one more minute. I mean, sorry, we've been listening to the Council and to the Commission. I think this is an important subject. The joint reviews of the past actually reveal that the data were being used for purposes way beyond what was allowed by the then agreements. How can I now have trust that future joint reviews are going to be any better? So, you know, I realize that if we vote against this, that we are in a problematic situation. It is not a disastrous, but a problematic situation. I have tried to get to a result that would be better We have been trying for 2 years. That is precisely the reason why, as a rapporteur 2 years ago, I recommended to this House that we suspend the vote and will try to renegotiate. If I wanted to create a mess, I would have recommended as a rapporteur 2 years ago to chuck it out. And I didn't. I am very sorry that after so many years of negotiations with our closest friends and allies, we have not achieved a better result, and I deeply regret that I am not in a position to recommend to this House to endorse this agreement.